there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here with an update video to yesterday's video on Market Monday talking about what we needed in Modern Horizons to sell the set. Now, I was quite disappointed, as were others, with Modern Horizons being a expensive box to purchase. So this is going to, I think they're going to do odd even years of a set like Battle Bond and then a set like Modern Horizons. This one is even titled MH1, leading us to believe that there will be MH2 and kind of how Conspiracy was, Conspiracy 1 and Conspiracy 2 into the foreseeable future. And this one, though, is about double the price, or at least 1.5 times the price of what a regular standard set is going to be. They're going to come in 36 packs. And so there needed to be something to push them over the edge and really justify the sales price. So lo and behold, I suggested there probably needs to be some sort of highly anticipated land cycle. I was suggesting maybe a dual snow-covered land to sell the set. There were a couple of signs with a bunch of permanents that were using snow-covered mana. And here's another one that was spoiled today called the Chiller Pillar. So I'm still assuming there's going to be some sort of dual, probably comes into play tapped, like we've seen with the Khans of Tarkir or the Gate cycle with snow lands to really fix the multicolored theme of the set. However, we did get a land cycle that was printed, and there have been some moaning about this. Other than I think the moaning is unwarranted about the Horizon lands. And it's pretty cool that we can actually call them Horizon lands because it was called Horizon Canopy was the original one that was printed with this sort of mechanic. And it is a very, very popular land. I would say that after the fetch lands from Zendikar and going back to Onslaught, the original fetch lands and Zendikar fetch lands, the next land that is the most popular land would probably be Horizon Canopy, as far as just the sheer demand that the card has for it. If you can see over at the Iconic Masters version of Horizon Canopy, it is one of the cards that has held its most value. This is a rare, not a mythic, out of the set of Iconic Masters, and you can see that it is the second most expensive card in the set next to Mana Drain as a mythic, and it's not that far behind. In fact, it is almost $25, well, over, what, $26, $27 more than Aether Vial, and Aether Vial has a ton of decks that are like Death and Taxes use the Vial, the Humans use the Vial. There are lots of decks that use Aether Vial. It was printed as an uncommon, so keep that in mind, but the demand for Aether Vial is huge, and Horizon Canopy actually outdemands the Aether Vial. So there's a huge demand for these type of cards. If we actually go back to Horizon Canopy, you can see that it's played in a plethora of decks in the modern format and even sees play in Legacy. So this was a knockout of the park idea for Wizards of the Coast. I don't know why these type of cards couldn't be introduced into a standard set. I don't think they're that broken for standard. However, this is a good place for them, and they will have a resounding demand for a long time for these lands. So I now do believe that Modern Horizons is going to be an investable set in the foreseeable future. You have to be careful with how demand creates more supply, and then supply eventually outstretches the demand and leads to sets where a lot of the cards can't be worth a lot of money. Just look at like Khans of Tarkir or Battle for Zendikar as an example, that there are cards out of those sets that see a lot of play but can't go up past bulk prices due to the fact that those sets just sold off the shelf. So there could be a little bit of that going on. However, I think to design the perfect set for Wizards of the Coast, they need to find that balance to where the set doesn't have the initial very low demand like Conspiracy sets where the people just didn't purchase them because they just didn't really have that many exciting cards in them, and then 2-3 years later there just wasn't enough supply out there, and these sets just became incredibly expensive due to just the lack of supply. And I'd even put sort of Battle Bond in that sort of category, or you have the opposite like Ultimate Masters where it just had such demand that cards are having a very, very hard time to recover. So the perfect set is I'd actually say Battle Bond would be the perfect set for that, to where there was the initial good demand, it continued to sell for a long time, and the cards still became investable. And it does look like Modern Horizons could be shaping out to have that effect. I don't think that there is anything that's spoiled so far that is just going to be like, oh, this is Ultimate Masters, you got to buy. But these lands are going to either sneak up on us or they're going to have the demand that I foresee they're going to have, which is going to shake up the Modern format and replace a lot of other lands like the Check lands and the Pain lands, especially for decks like Storm, and the decks like I think Twilight Mire is just going to be replaced by Nurturing Peatland for the rock type strategies, and even Jund might be picking up the Nurturing Peatland as their go-to way to get a land even in the graveyard for Tarmogoyf is a good thing. Or one of the things that the Modern is notorious for is if you do end up going into a grindy match, you do want your lands to have some sort of value long term, and this is one of the easiest ones just to crack and just draw a card off of it. So Bogles likes the Modern Horizons or the Horizon Canopy for that reason. So does Humans. Many decks have they prefer the Horizon Canopy over the alternatives for that very reason. So again, I think this is a knock out of the park for the set. It does look good right now, and this is perfect for the design space. I actually like sets that you can actually draft and do sealed with, and like Ultimate Masters, unfortunately the demand for it was so high that it was very tough to find those boxes just to have fun with. And since this is a printed demand set, I think that there will be many sealeds and drafts that will be able to fire with this set. The demand won't be to the point where the supply will just get completely destroyed to where the set sells for way over the SRP, or the even though there is no SRP, but the usual 35% over distributor pricing. It will stay in that little sweet spot where we can actually afford to draft this and have fun with this set. And it will be the perfect set to where I don't think that Wizards of the Coast needs to worry about their future with Modern Horizons. It will have that perfect selling point to where they can continue to use this as like a playground type set, to where they can play around with the design and create some of these other cards that you want to see how well they'd work in the Modern format, and even give a little bit of cards for the other formats like Pauper and Commander all in one without, again, breaking the supply chain or really breaking the format. So that's kind of where the set has led me to believe it's going to end up with. There are some fun cards that we don't know if they're going to be Modern playable. There are many cards that absolutely are not powerful enough for the Modern scene, and there are many cards that fit very well into Pauper and Commander. So 2 thumbs up so far for the Modern Horizons set. Many people have been really negative about the set, myself included to a bit. I've warned people from investing in Modern Horizons. I think it's going to be a set that will be looked back on with rose-colored goggles later on. It might just have that effect where it is a slow-moving set because the value just might not be there for people to crack the booster boxes. But it should be a fun set to draft. Should be a fun set to do sealed. I'm anticipating the pre-releases will be quite successful, and I'm anticipating that the sales of the set will be quite successful. But again, doesn't push over that threshold to where it becomes like Ultimate Masters and just gets bought out to oblivion, and the prices go up, and it leaves a sour taste in the mouth, and then it ends up crashing the prices later on because then they have to reprint to demand of this, where the supply just becomes just exuberant and whatnot. Again, it has to have that perfect balance, and it's very tough. I commend Wizards. Sometimes they fail miserably at finding that perfect balance, and throw the baby out with the bathwater with their choices and be very conservative. And other times they completely are on the opposite end of the spectrum and just throw all their eggs in one basket, and it leads to the part where how you can actually ever beat an Ultimate Masters. It sets a precedent, and then those precedents are pretty terrible if that's going to be what they're going to be doing for every set. And it just doesn't lead to a sustainable method that they can actually get cards into the mix. So anyway, let's just look over some of these other cards that were spoiled here with Collected Conjuring. This is a 4 mana XL top 6 cards in your library. You may cast up to 2 sorcery cards with current mana cost 3 or less from among them without paying their mana cost, and put the exiled cards not cast this way on the bottom of your library. This one's pretty interesting for Storm, pretty interesting for some of the other Storm-like effects in the format. By 6 cards, you should find 2 sorcery cards with converted mana cost 3 or less. Remember, it's sorcery, not instants and sorcery. So Storm does cast a lot of sorceries. The worst case scenario is you hit 2 cantrips that just draw you 2 cards. And it really does add to your Storm count, though. If you just hit 2 cards that generate mana, you've basically net upped with the Collected Conjuring and added to your Storm count. I do think this is interesting. I don't know if Storm actually needs it. There are plenty of options in this particular slot, but it's definitely something that I think is the perfect power level. And that's what I'm going to go back full circle and say, this is exactly where the set Modern Horizons has really left a mark on me, is that it's experimental. I've called this kind of like the playground set, where they can play around with particular cards without having to break the modern format. I was very, very worried that there would be cards printed in this set that would absolutely just be like, well, there goes modern as we know it. But it does seem to be that it hit that perfect power level where it's like, we don't know. We don't know if this card, it seems playable enough, but is it? All right, so let's go on to the next card. This is Urza, Lord High Artificer. This is a 1/4 for 4 mana. When the Lord of Artificer enters the battlefield, you create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token and gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control, so it's at least a 1/1. And then you can tap an untapped artifact to add blue to your mana pool. Shuffle your library, then exile the top card until end of turn. You may play that card without paying its mana cost. So I had an Artificer deck back in the day that was Artificer Tribal, and it worked on very similar axis with your artifacts being able to generate mana. What is it? The Master. There's a card out of Scars of Mirrodin that allowed you to add the colorless mana by tapping artifacts. And now this one's going to allow you to add blue mana. So I think that this is something that could actually see play, kind of an Artificer Ball deck that works very similar to Elf Ball. So this is a pretty cool addition. Definitely going to have to revisit it. There's some cool Artificers in the mix. There's some cool constructs if you actually go that sort of strategy. There's Walking Ballista that can definitely be a good win con with being able to generate a ton of mana. Just keep adding to the Walking Ballista. And there are some very, very good Artificers that still exist that synergize quite well with the Urza. So this is a great brew around card. It will be interesting to brew around this. Very similar to Elf Ball, I would say, or Humans, and being able to just flood the board with a lot of early threats that they then can just have some very swingy effects. Maybe even like Vizier combo is where I see this card, or not this card going in that deck, but creating like an archetype very similar to it where it can just snowball out of control if left unchecked. So really, really cool card. I think this will have a lot of demand as well, and we'll just wait to see how this plays out. Chiller Pillar is kind of just a fluff card for draft. Same with Pondering Mage, 3/4 for 5 mana that allows you to ponder. Is kind of interesting, but is definitely not good enough for any sort of constructed format. We have the Astral Drift that is officially spoiled. Nimble Mongoose is very interesting for the format. A lot of people did think this card would be printed for the Modern. It's tough to put in a standard set because of the mechanic Shroud. They've gone away with it with Hexproof, and the threshold is very similar to Delirium in Modern. It's easy to get 7 cards in your graveyard and have a 3/3 Shroud. I don't know where this deck wants to play, if the typical rock type strategies do want it or Death Shadow decks do want it. They already have a lot of good options. The Wild Nacatl seems a little bit easier to turn on as a 3/3, but then again, this has Shroud. So yeah, I think this will see play in various Modern decks. Dismantling Blow is a filler card. Let's pick up these 2 foreign cards to see exactly where they are. We have a... Now there we go. We have Force of Despair. This one's actually pretty sweet. So if it's not your turn, you may exile a black card from your hand rather than paying the spell's mana cost, and you destroy all creatures that enter the battlefield this turn. So it's going to help against the recursion-based strategies, the dredge-based strategies, to at least destroy them. It doesn't exile them, though. I mean, I think that's the big... It doesn't really do much against dredge, I guess, for that. Because then those come back again. But it is going to help against some of the degenerate decks that just try to combo off by putting a bunch of cards into play. Destroy all creatures into the battlefield so it can get through. I don't know. There's some, though, that if they do come into play, they already get their effect. So, I mean, it can get around certain cards that they cheat in, but like Goryo, Goryo's Vengeance, the Gristlebrand. Gristlebrand will still be able to draw a bunch of cards off of it. Still a good sideboard card for sure. And these, I think, are, I don't know, I have been very critical about free cards, but most of these free cards were printed to shut down degenerate stuff. So I'm liking this card, Force of Despair. It's a welcome addition to the Modern format. Then we have a very, very exciting one with the form of Lightning Skelemental. That's a decent little name. Now, I've been trying to get like a black-red attrition base strategy to work, kind of like a burn / rip out of hand. Blightning's always been a card that was almost there for Modern and just didn't have enough oomph for the format. Now we have Lightning Skelemental, which can be found off of Bloodbraid Elf, which is kind of interesting, which is a Trample Haste 6/1, so it's a strict upgrade to Ball of Lightning with Trample Haste and sacrifice end of the turn. That's the same thing that Ball Lightning does. And whenever it deals combat damage to player, though, that player discards 2 cards. So it has that ability to then rip out cards out of their hand. So I think that this is going to see play with Bloodbraid Elf. You could also make the there could be some sort of reanimation strategy too that will get value off of getting Lightning Skelemental back in the mix. I don't know if like Living End would want it, because it does. It's interesting in Living End, because in Living End you cast it, you rip out some cards, you do some damage, and then when you actually Living End, it will come back in with haste. I could see this sort of card see play in that sort of shell, or any sort of aristocrats type shell too. But I think where it shines is definitely Bloodbraid Elf. This is them trying to bring Lightning or Ball of Lightning back into a relevant target. And this one should be a fun brew around card. Don't see it warping the format. Just another good addition for Modern. So I'm changing my tone for Modern Horizons. I do think that it is a pretty neat set at the moment. It's exactly where I think they should be designing for a set. I don't think they should be trying to break the format. I don't think they should have been trying to put in legacy staples into Modern in like just with the first set, maybe introduce a few here and there. And then with Modern Horizons 2, maybe it's like, okay, let's revisit this legacy staple, see if it could work in the set, and slowly impact the Modern format rather than just changing it overnight. So 2 thumbs up so far for the spoilers for Modern Horizons. I'm not a Debbie Downer with this set whatsoever. The price point still is a little bit, got me scratching my head, which I warn people from trying to make this as just an impulse purchase to where you're going to invest in it and it's going to double up within 6 months. The demand can be its own undoing. The very similar thing is what I'm predicting what is going to happen with War of the Spark. War of the Spark is just one of the best standard sets printed in a long time, but that's going to be its own undoing to where they're going to continue to print and print and print and print War of the Sparks. A little bit of information about War of the Sparks. There is rumored to be another massive wave of Japanese War of the Spark that is going to hit the English markets, as well as a confirmed massive wave of War of the Spark English that is going to be restocked to all of the distributors. It's about a month out, but all of the distributors should be stocked up to the brim with War of the Spark, and I expect that the prices will then start to crash for the because there was the normal supply that they printed for every set for a standard set that was stretched out faster than we've ever seen for a standard set, and now we have a massive restocking of the War of the Spark, which will add even more supply. And so be careful about those if you're investing in singles or even sealed product for War of the Spark. I'm assuming Modern Horizons is going to have a similar effect where people are just going to go, crazy about this set, and that will lead to another reprint. So just hold on that. I think there are better places to park your money than doing this. But if you want to pick up boxes to have fun with, it looks like a pretty fun set. There's going to be enough demand for it. You're probably easily going to be breaking even right now, and I've said this like a broken record. It looks to be one of like the perfectly designed sets as far as a supplemental product. Battle Bond was also really good, and so whoever's designing these supplemental products, you got to give some kudos to. They're doing a very good job for these sets. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. This is Kevin with Rogue Deck Builder. Thanks for watching.